I think there's a lot of people who are very nervous right now because they say whenever you have a health crisis and an economic crisis like this, the will of free people gets tested, meaning that they're much more open to receiving quote unquote help or having governments implement temporary measures or more surveillance or things that maybe wouldn't be as easy to get across the finish line during a time when there wasn't those health and economic crisis. And so maybe let's just start with like how bad the problem really is, right? I know that you guys have done some work on understanding. We see data being presented from countries all around the world around the health crisis and the economic crisis, but just if it is an authoritarian country, like how much can we believe the data that we're getting? And how do you guys think about level setting those data sets versus countries where maybe there's more democracy or transparency and confirmation of the numbers and data?
I'm really glad you asked this, and I want to unpack it with you and with everybody who's listening, because I think there's a lot of lessons to draw here. First of all, I think we're being led to believe in many cases, especially even in open societies, Western countries, that there's a lot of lessons in authoritarianism and that we should grant emergency powers to our rulers in times of crisis, and that like a very strong centralized kind of response is probably best, and that maybe we even want to grant extraordinary surveillance powers, and that there's a lot to learn from China and the Chinese government. And I think this is a very wrong and dangerous perspective to take. I think that there's this sort of culture war that's starting to happen, to bubble over, where it's arguably not even so much a war as a battle that's almost being almost won by a particular side. And that's, again, the side of, the public safety is more important than civil liberties. And again, these are arguments coming from mainstream people, the mainstream media, and a lot of technologists actually, who are like, well, whatever, privacy, who cares? What's more important now is that we save lives. And they kind of look to China and China's quote unquote performance as validation of their argument. And what you're starting to see is people become very laissez-faire about their rights and freedoms because they're just focused on what they're learning about COVID and how potentially these governments can protect them. But what's very, very important to understand is that the performance of authoritarian governments is not what it seems. So you might look at the data now that the Financial Times or New York Times is reporting. You constantly see these little charts that the Financial Times puts out of cases and deaths. And it shows all these countries kind of like going up over time. And then it shows China with this like amazing flattening of the curve. And now it looks like things are cool there now. And the Financial Times, as one of the papers of record in the world, to be honest, kind of repeats this daily over and over and over again. They're hitting people over the head with the idea that China has solved the problem. And the core issue is the Financial Times is regurgitating data from the Chinese Communist Party. They're regurgitating lies. The Chinese Communist Party, remember, has been lying for the last half decade to the world about the prison camps and gulags in Xinjiang, in the northwest part of China. In the northwest part of China, we can see from outer space using satellite imagery that there are vast numbers, a huge network of concentration camps, prison camps, where the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is imprisoning male Uyghurs. They are a Muslim minority, ethnic minority. And they are imprisoning, according to the latest estimates, we have anywhere from 1 to 2 million people in these camps. And this is such a shocking thing, such a visible thing. You can see it from outer space. And yet they lie and deny that they exist. So we're going to take this regime's word that there's whatever it is, 4,000 deaths is what they're reporting. And all the mainstream media and all of our policymakers and all of these influencers in Silicon Valley are basically looking at China and saying, yeah, we might have to, follow some of their measures. They've, I know, they're like, well, they might be doing some things we don't like, but, you can't deny the results. And I'm telling you, you need to deny the results. Those results are fake. There are extensive reports in Hubei province, where Wuhan is, where the epicenter of the outbreak originally started, where people have just been watching the funeral homes, and they've just been looking at the urns that are coming in and out. And this was back like a month ago. But basically, local residents estimated that there had to be at least 40,000 deaths based on just what they saw in that one city alone. Okay. I would be shocked if the actual number of COVID deaths in China was less than 250,000. I'd be shocked. And yet the news media, and I say that in a kind of half loving way. I mean, free press is really important, but people have become so gullible in believing what China is saying that we're kind of getting sucked into this mindset that we should be more like them. Like, there's so many arguments and articles written by influencers in Britain and the United States saying there's a lot to learn from China. And I'm telling you, yes, there is a lot to learn from China. We should run as far away from their government model as possible. And the final piece to this puzzle is that if it is true that we should seek a more authoritarian structure in our societies so that we can handle public health crises more effectively, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say that that's their honest argument. Then we need to consider the fact that how is it possible that one of the most authoritarian governments in the world, one of the most secretive governments in the world, the government that has the most censorship and surveillance per capita of any society in human history, did such a bad job controlling the outbreak at the beginning in December and in January that, even with all their Orwellian surveillance tech and all the control they had and all of this strong centralization under Xi Jinping, they failed. The virus became an outbreak and has killed untold numbers of Chinese and devastated their economy, and has basically ruined their global brand. So if they couldn't stop this thing with all the centralized control and surveillance in the world, then I think the lessons that we need to draw are that we need to take a different approach. We need to fight this particular crisis, COVID, other public health crises, and any sort of national disaster, whether it be from another nation state or from a natural perspective, from an economic perspective. We need to fight these things with a spirit of openness and innovation and a free flow of information. If we allow the kind of axes of censorship and control and surveillance to win the day, we're not going to like the results.